From 1996 to today, we've lost 4,400 companies in the public markets. So if you went to the stock exchange to invest, if you opened your brokerage account and you wanted to invest in stock in 1996, you had 8,000 companies to choose from. Today you have 3,600, and it continues to shrink. So what we don't have in the small business environment is access. Usually I have considerable time I take on our purposes and what we're doing at the Dream Exchange and why we make a difference. You may have seen this because we've been sending it out. It's our promotional what our purposes are video. And after that, I'll give you a little introduction to myself. So I'm going to start this video and let it play. And then right after that, we'll get our webinar started. Thanks for everyone for being here. We view this as a real mission to change our society. And the truth is that 120 years ago, you couldn't travel to the store without a horse and a buggy. You couldn't travel interstate without getting on a train. And since that time, well, clearly no one would consider taking their horse to the grocery store. You get in a climate-controlled vehicle. We live in a technological society where we have wireless communication that never existed before. We've changed the way human beings live on Earth in the last 120 years in such a profound way that it's almost difficult to imagine that we're not all thriving and that there are people who are barely surviving. And the reason that innovation came to be is because capital markets supported the most imaginative ideas. We gave our money to things that would expand our ability to survive, and we've all been better off for it. And it is across all diverse marketplaces, across all people everywhere. And we're concentrating on developing markets in areas where the greatest ideas are in fact born. And we want to get them access to the money they need to expand upon that. That's really what the Dream Exchange is all about at its core purpose. That inspires me, to be honest with you, and I'm really grateful for our team, and I hope that gives you a little insight. I'm going to cover some of that throughout today. And I'm Joe Cicala. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Dream Exchange. A little bit by way of background, professionally, I've been a lawyer and a CPA, or one or both of those professions, for more than 30 years. And this is truly a journey for me. And today you're going to find out, when I say impact investing, it's about ideas. It's about how we are going to change the way we live by our work. What do we do every day? And how do we invest in the things that we are all hoping for a better future in? And so impact investing is all about that. It's ironic that we say the future of impact investing. What we're talking about is happening now and has already happened. And you'll see some valuable information about that in today's webinar. And we are absolutely at the forefront. We're the leaders in this. We're shouting it from the rooftops. We're making a tremendous impact on the political as well as the financial world. We're certainly outspoken, and people are listening to us. So we're a stock exchange in formation, which is really a daunting task, but we're thriving at creating that. So first off, the business idea, that concept, that imaginative thing that a human being gave birth to, is in fact the totality of the value of a business and is what investors invest in. Good venture capitalists really look carefully at where an idea will go. What's the direction it's headed in? How much expansion of that idea will there be? How many other corollary products will there be? And they seldom are looking, especially in the infancy of the company, at its profitability. And not only is that in the infancy, but you see 3 companies here, and this list could go on and on and on. These are some of the most valuable companies in the world. Palo Alto Networks is an extraordinarily valuable company, $32.9 billion value, and its net income is negative $142 million. So how is that possible? How is it possible that a company like Palo Alto doesn't make any money, that somehow the investor support for that company hasn't disappeared? Uber, same thing, over $100 billion value, yet they lose nearly $1 billion in net income. When I say these things, I'm sorry to snicker, but it's just ironic because I've been a trained accountant my whole career, and many of you are trained business people who are looking at it and saying, yeah, how's that possible? If I lost that kind of money, no one would invest in me, right? Airbnb, $113 billion value of the company, losing $4 billion or $3.8 billion. How is that possible that these companies maintain investor support, yet somehow they don't turn a profit? Another one that's not on there is Tesla Motors, the largest auto manufacturer in the world today. The first time they were ever profitable was last July. So what is it about these companies? What's the common theme? Well, they're all ideas whose time has come. The value of your idea in your business's infancy will determine the expansion and the largesse of that company. How big will it be? Well, it all depends on the value of that idea. And there are some very specific ways that you want to look at whether or not your idea is going to expand. And it really will revolve around your imagination. So you can already see that the marketplace, in the largest marketplace, is clearly supporting something that only existed in the smallest of marketplaces. In excuse me, in a marketplace where, if you're a venture capital startup and you haven't made any money yet, maybe you haven't even made your first sale, but you've come up with the next big thing. How are you communicating that to your investors? Because it's very important to be able to do that. The importance of being able to do that can't be understated, because it's communicating the value of your imagination. That's what they're investing in. And each of these companies and many others just like them have done a very effective job, not only communicating their investors, but the fact is that we can all experience Airbnb and Uber and use of Palo Alto Networks products, as well as driving in the world's first mass-produced electric cars. So we can experience those products. How can you, before the entire population of Earth is experiencing your product, get the message out there? Help others understand the importance of your idea. And the truth is that it is about expressing what's important to you about your idea. So the importance of your idea can become very mechanical and mathematical. So for example, here, we have a certain technology that we've been using. This is going back to the research we did to get the Dream Exchange operational. This is 14 years of research. And what you see here is a graph, and I've seen a graph like this hundreds of times. Small companies would approach me for help in raising their money as a lawyer, and very often at the back of their business plan, I would see a graph that looked very much like this. There are a number of problems with this graph. First of all, there's an assumption that you see on the bottom of the graph, there's time. And the vertical line is the value of the company. And there's certain assumptions that the owner of the company makes about the value. What is its value today? What will its value be tomorrow? And they're very mechanical. They're calculated based upon the profitability of the company. How much earnings will it have? If you're sophisticated, the term for earnings is usually EBITDA. So what are my earnings? And then to calculate value, we multiply the earnings by some multiple. Now, as I alluded to earlier, there is an entire 1 hour video, our webinar, that will train you in the exact calculation of an earnings multiple, how it's done and how you should look at it, and how to use the value of your idea in that mechanical math equation so that you can make this graph into a reality. Now, even this graph, here's some of the problems with this graph that I alluded to. You see on the bottom time, it says there's T minus 3, 2, 1, some period of time. Maybe it's 3 years or 2 years or 1 year or months, whatever you may be looking at. In terms of that vertical line, when the day arrives that you close your investment, that someone actually believes in you enough to support your company and give you money. And every one for one, every business plan I've seen shows a very nice linear progression from the time they arrived at the money, which is that vertical line you see, into the future, following that yellow line. And it's very linear, it's very algebraic, it's very one up, one over. And everybody feels very satisfied with that estimation. And usually that's what they're trying to sell to the investor, that the value of my idea, it will progress very evenly, very nicely. We're going to make more sales next week than we made last week. And in the future, it will be worth significantly more. 60 months out, this is when it's 5 years. It will be worth X dollars. And if you invest in it today, it'll be worth more money later. Let's face it. That's why people invest, right? If they invest $1 today, they're hoping to get more than $1 back tomorrow. They don't invest to get $1 or less later, right? That would be foolish. So in this instance, what you see is the optimal perfection of everything has worked perfectly. There have been no waves that have crashed over the bow. There have been no squalls or storms or unexpected events on this voyage you're undertaking for your company. Going into the event where you get your money, there's that flat line, or perhaps you're increasing, things are looking up. This is just simply untrue. This graph is just simply untrue. It's just not how life works. Life does not work this way. Now, there is a correlation to how things do work. There is an actual way to look at your company, and we love to help people with this. This is one of the primary introductory services and products that we're here to help you with. We want you to look more realistically, because that yellow line may have two effects. One, it may give more value to your investor than he deserves. Or two, and more often than not, it would give the investor less value than he deserves. And what you need is some kind of combination of where are we today and where will we be tomorrow, so that you can correctly calculate the value of this idea you have. And I don't care if you are a mature company and you have ideas and you don't consider yourself a startup anymore. The same technology works in exactly the same way. The pilot company that we used to test this on was a 90-year-old company. So it will work equally well with early stage as well as long-term companies. And here's what's a bit more of a realistic view of how this works. Let's assume for a moment that this idea that you have, and I'm going to get to the idea in a moment, but let's just assume for a moment that the value of your idea going in is in fact on par. It's flat. There are no really negative things impacting your value. Your value is not dramatically declining before the investment funds arrive. That's that line. That's the day the investment funds arrive. Well, if you're flat or going up and things are improving, the day the investment funds arrive, in fact, you're worth more money. You're a more valuable company the day after you've closed an investment deal than before it. Naturally, you have a lot of money to execute your business plan. And there's a phase to this. That phase 2, you see, is called deployment. You're now going to use the money. So what you're doing beforehand is preparing and taking careful steps to prepare for the day in which you receive the golden ticket, the money that's going to send your company into the stratosphere. Well, the value does in fact go up. But what are you going to do? What do people do after they receive investment money? They spend it. They have to spend it. It's the purpose of giving the investment, right? You're going to hire staff. You're going to buy products. You're going to put up plant and equipment. You're going to do all the things that a prudent business owner would do in using that investment money to start to produce increased value to your idea. Now, mind you, I didn't say profits, okay? I'm trying to pull apart and distinguish that profitability from an idea and value are two completely and utterly separate things. And this is the best kept but most well-known secret that exists in investing. Good investors are looking at the holistic view of a company and trying to predict how valuable the idea would be. Imagine if you were in that garage with Steve Jobs when he was there inventing Apple Computer. The world didn't know that a genius was going to forever transform how we communicated. But we all use the products nearly every day. I'm talking on an Apple computer right now. I have an iPhone. It transformed music and other entertainment in ways that are unimaginable to us today from the day of that garage. But his idea was worth more than $1 trillion at the time it was being born. All the rest was mechanics. All the rest was corporate haggling and making sure that the next deal and the next sale and the next plant and the next construction were accomplished, because the idea superseded everything else. And if you have an idea that fits inside of a box like that, if you have something great about your company, and I'm going to tell you, the pilot company that we worked on did not have a patent. It did not have protected intellectual property. It had very boring electric technology that had been around since Tesla was a toddler. Very boring. But their idea for how to sell it and their idea for how it could be used was different than everyone else's idea. They had a wonderful team of engineers who had figured out different ways to use this very shop-worn technology. So you should be applying, this is our technology, you should be applying your technology, your idea, to what we're doing here. And what we have at the very top is an area called the equilibrium price. That's the optimal value for your company in that red box, some period of time. It could be months, it could be years that you're trying to estimate. So if you take the beginning of time in that red box, things happen in between there, right? What we have is this swooping curve. You've spent all the money, you've deployed the money, as finance people like to say, and there's a trough. There's a low point. Now, hopefully this is an optimal graph. Hopefully you come out of the low point. Hopefully that little red, almost two triangular figurine that's in the bottom of the trough, that the length of that and the depth of that are something that's very important for you to predict. What you have to be predicting there is financial mechanics, not value. Because the value of your idea, long term, is what's going to dictate whether or not investors continue to support you. So if you reach that trough and you are an obsolete idea, nobody's going to want your product. Well, that happens. It does happen, and all too often it happens where the future hasn't been adequately described. The bigness of the idea hasn't been adequately communicated, and investors quit, and so do entrepreneurs. I think I would call it the I quit zone, right at the bottom of that trough. Now, what's good about that is good deals, things that do work really well, they tend to come out of that. And they don't necessarily come out of it because they have enormous profitability. In fact, some of the most enormously profitable ideas, concepts, things that are born of human imagination don't work that way at all. They can be profitable, but they're not good ideas. And long term, they're going to be problematic. In fact, some of them are become illegal. So what we try to do in that expansion phase, that last phase, is really concentrate on the bigness of the idea. Now, there's another webinar that specifically just discusses this. It discusses how to calculate the value, the bigness of the idea that you have. Now, mind you, I'm talking now like a venture capitalist, like a private equity person who's going to make an investment. What we're really talking about at the Dream Exchange is, if your idea is so good, if you're something that you can actually create a company that can be listed on a stock exchange, the general public, the massive investing public of the United States will choose that idea. And when they choose it, you'll get investor support, just like Palo Alto, just like Uber, just like Tesla, just like the companies that have consistently not had financial, mechanical success, but somehow they're thriving and they become the biggest companies on the planet. And what we really want to do, and we have products that can help you with this, is called EP optimization, equilibrium price optimization. So there's an optimal level. It's not unlimited. It's not vertical straight up and down. Now, what you see there, some companies will also show me a yellow line that goes nearly vertical. That belief system that your idea has an unlimited value because every person on earth is going to use it 12 times a day would make that curve tend to be almost vertical. Okay. Now, why do I say every person on earth using it 12 times a day? Because when you look at the value of Facebook, we literally have hundreds of millions of people who interact on Facebook at least a dozen times or more a day. That you'll notice I didn't say anyone made a sale. I didn't use a single conventional term that if you've gone to a college of business that they will teach you in that college. No one said to Mark Zuckerberg, how should you make sales for Facebook? He actually gave the product away. All you needed was an email address, and he emailed you back a password, and instantly he had a customer. The value of his communication device was priceless, very much like Apple Computer. And you can think of examples in a similar way. And what you should be doing is looking at these enormous success stories in relation to your own business and your own idea and see how much of what you're doing can touch all these other people. Because the truth is, those ideas are born in the most obscure places. They're not born on the top floor of the highest rent building in New York City. You know, Facebook was born in a dorm room at Harvard. Apple Computer was born in a garage. So these ideas are something that are being housed in very, very, what I would call almost humble environments. So I'm talking to you, the person who has that humble environment. And I'm also talking to you, the investor, who may be looking at it and saying, well, their website is terrible. or their offices are not good, or they haven't been able to make enough sales because somehow they're not communicating well to the public. You need to strip away the conventional way of looking. This is the future of impact investing, right? It's the future of the idea that will impact everyone in our society the most. And I'm concentrating on this today mostly because this is what the Dream Exchange is all about. We cannot lose those companies. We cannot lose supporting those ideas. The support for the greatest ideas is, in fact, the highest priority in all of our society, in my view, or I wouldn't do this for a living. So when you think about this, and I'm going to give you a little example right now that is Company A. This is actually pragmatic data. So I had our team actually. Sometimes I give this example out and I make up an example, but this is actually downloadable information from doing a little bit of research on the internet. So Company A exists. All right, it has revenue of $150 billion annually. It's an enormous amount of top line, right? As the financial people like to call it, top line. It has 400,000 products in circulation. Wow, that's a lot of products, right? Large internet customer base. So the internet presence is enormous. They have import-export troubles. So these are some of the, if you were doing a strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, threats, they call that a SWOT analysis. Every MBA on the planet is capable of writing a really good SWOT analysis. This is some of it. They have low to virtually no overhead. So their cost of goods sold is very low. So a lot of it is administrative. A lot of it is administrative and transportation costs, right? And it's mainly produced in other countries. So what would anyone declare the value of Company A to be? So if you look at Company A, you could begin making an analysis that, well, anything that produces $150 billion in revenues should be very valuable. Its stock price should be very high because naturally at some point you're going to turn a profit and pay dividends. Or if you're not, somehow somebody paying $150 billion or the society at large paying that's an enormously potentially profitable business. And it would be very, very valuable, extremely valuable, in fact. So As we go down, and I use this, I've taught this in MBA programs, and I get the MBAs to look at this very carefully so they can begin to look at those financial mechanics and do this evaluation. So, but this is a different webinar, right? We talked about the value of an idea. What is in your imagination? What is something that would benefit society as a whole from this company? So this is an actual company, it's an actual industry, and the product of the company is human trafficking. Now, that was a punch in the belly for me. I usually do use different products because my team actually went out and looked this up because I'd been using hypotheticals. But the value of selling human beings is zero. That idea is worthless. In fact, in our country, approximately 150 years ago, we fought a war and 500,000 people died to end that. Right? Human slavery is not a valuable idea. And I just don't think there's an argument to be made on its behalf. But somehow it's being sold. Somehow our society looks at different products and says, it can make a lot of money. I think I'll do it. And I'm using this extreme example. It's such an extreme example because you don't actually consider, and I don't certainly in my day-to-day life always consider, what is the impact of what I'm creating? The impact of creating another person being a slave is absolutely worthless. So what is your idea? How does your idea expand our ability to survive is what's most important. And what I'm pulling apart for you right now in a very, very dramatic and extreme way is the fact that dollars and money and profit and value are two utterly and completely separate notions. And unless you approach your business from the standpoint that your imagination, that your idea, that the thing that you are trying to contribute with the energy that you have in your life is something that would be viewed as very valuable, you're missing the boat on the value of your company for an investor. And here's what's really interesting. What we have done, and this is really the mechanics behind the purposes of the Dream Exchange. Your small company, or even if you're a mature company, but your small business is the most important business to our nation. And getting support for your business in a democratized way, in an environment where small businesses get public support. Now, there's some terminology here, an IPO. Again, if you're very sophisticated, fine, and there'll be questions at the end. If you're not, IPO stands for Initial Public Offering. Now, in America today, there are only two ways you can sell stock legally. Okay. Now, the 1933 Securities Act starts off in a very dismal way. It says, you may not use interstate commerce to sell stock. And that paragraph ends. So it seems rather hopeless, but it's being done every day, right? So how is it being done? Well, the first way is that you take the shares of your stock and you write up all of the information on your company and you submit that to the Securities Exchange Commission and you register your shares of stock. That's called a registration statement. So when you register those shares of stock, the first time that you're able to sell those shares to the broad investing public, the general public, they call that the initial time. It's the initial public offering of shares. So that's IPO. We hear IPO every day. That's all IPO means. It's the first time the shares are offered to the general investing public. Now, in this slide, and the other way, there's two ways. So that's one way. The other way is you have to be exempt from a registration. Okay, you have to prepare the necessary paperwork not to have to register your shares for sale to the general public. However, at that point, you're limited in who you can sell it to. You cannot sell it to the general public. You can only sell it to a limited number of investors, qualified investors, accredited investors, sophisticated investors, or perhaps in crowdfunding, there are new ways to raise up to $5 million using a limited investing audience. So either you're exempt or you're registered. And if you're registered, you can sell your shares to anyone. And the fact is, what you see in this graph is the evidence, and this is really hard evidence, that for many decades, most of the companies that took advantage of the American investing public investing in them, that were able to go and expand and create those new ideas, were very small companies. The white portion of the graph you see are initial public offerings under $50 million. Now, that may seem like an enormous amount of money, especially if you're a small business owner. It's like, oh my gosh, $50 million. I only need 10 or 15 or 20 million and I'll never look back. On the other hand, when you consider $50 million in relation to, Chase Bank or Apple Computer, their balance sheet, the value of their company is over $1 trillion. So $50 million is actually a very small number in proportion to the competitors you have. You're competing with the largest companies on the planet. So what we did in changing certain things was we shrunk the number of very small companies that availed themselves of the public marketplace. And this graph shows this. This is actually information that's been widely circulated in the government. It's part of our research. It was part of the Treasury Department's task force on how to create new initial public offerings. It's been in the Wall Street Journal. This is information that's been kicked around by everybody. And the problem is that we've identified this as a problem. But what we haven't done, and the Dream Exchange is actively doing this, is come up with a viable solution. How can we fix this? How can we generate support for the small businesses in our country through the public investment markets? Well, the first step we had to do was look at, what were the effects? What was harmful about it? Because if it is in fact harmful, it's a problem worth solving. It's something we should endeavor to put our time and our energy and the entire dedication of the Dream Exchange, for the most part, is dedicated to this. Because in fact, there's two things. One is that small company and the small business investor who really don't have access to one another. And the other is that this is a very diverse marketplace. This is a marketplace that is underserved. It's not a place that is conventional. It's not the place you ordinarily go look for investments like we are in the minority communities, in areas where the growth of a good company can really make a major impact on all of society. So that's an overarching statement about harmful effects. But when we go into the granular level, the small level, the harmful effects on companies, well, the first thing is, if you're a senior manager in a company, if you're an owner, an entrepreneur, you're distracted because you're trying to make sales and you're trying to grow your company. You're trying to handle your employees and you're trying to make payroll every week. And incidentally, we're going to throw a lot of the complexity of how to raise money at you now. If you're not very sophisticated, you're going to have a tough time. So senior management becomes enmeshed in a time-consuming effort to meet investors and create relationships and talk to venture capitalists and learn an entire new language of how can I raise investment money. And in fact, what would be really helpful, that's what a CEO does. CEOs manage shareholder expectations. That's what a CEO of a large company does. He runs the company, but he really has teams of people that are running the company. And what he's doing is setting a strategic course and managing the investors and managing all of that. What is ordinarily distracting to a small company, well, a large company has a lot of resources to handle that. But the small company could use the investment capital to hire more people, which would allow the senior management to actually do their job. But critical employment is delayed. Why? Because they don't have the money to hire the people. They don't have the money to expand. So in addition to that, there's this other barrier, which is this is a difficult task. Many have tried and few are successful at raising capital. It is a difficult thing to do. And what we're most concerned about at the Dream Exchange is that it threatens the survival of the very ideas that you saw in the beginning of this video. Those are the ideas that we need. Our society needs the imagination of every segment of society to make sure that we have the next version of the iPhone or the next version of Facebook. Those ideas sorry, lost my thunder. Those ideas are actually the most important ideas to our well-being as a society. So that's the harmful effect on companies. There are many others. And there's also a harmful effect on investors. I've worked with investors for 30 years. I've met the most wonderful people. Good investors tend to be people who will look carefully at what an idea is. But in an environment where they can't reach a public market, they do not have access to the companies that are the best companies. They never get to see those opportunities, and they especially don't get to see them at that early stage. Remember when I showed you the graph of our technology? Very often a successful investment is all the way at the back end at the equilibrium pricing end. That front end, they don't get to see them. And the primary problem with doing away with small business investing in our public markets is that there's no liquidity. Liquidity meaning you can turn your investment into cash again. You can sell some or all of your investment easily, because when you invest in a private company, the same constraints exist once you make the investment that existed for the entrepreneur in getting the investment to begin with. You can't resell the investment. You'd have to sell the entire company in most instances. So how do you get out? The famous question that I've received in the most terse terms from an investor is, how do I get out? How do I get my money back? How do I get my money back profitably? Very often, the most profitable companies are suffering with this problem. Facebook, before it was public, was a private company and suffered with this problem. There were people who wanted to sell their investments and couldn't until it went to the public markets. So without that liquidity coming to be born in a marketplace, a stock exchange marketplace, customized to help small businesses, this harmful effect will continue to pervade our society. So this is clearly a problem we've framed quite well. There are many harmful effects, and the solutions that we've come up with are really something that is an idea whose time has come. So if you look at the historical decline here, from 1996 to today, we've lost 4,400 companies in the public markets. So if you went to the stock exchange to invest, if you opened your brokerage account and you wanted to invest in stock in 1996, you had 8,000 companies to choose from. Today you have 3,600, and it continues to shrink. Now the value of those 36 companies, or 3,600 companies, is about $36 trillion. That's an enormous amount of value. And mind you, this whole video, I have not given a single instance where I said how much profitability there is. There are very profitable companies, and you should strive to be making a profit. You should be striving to sell something for more than it costs you to make it. That's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to demonize it. However, when we're looking at investment value, you invest in the entire company, and you invest in its entire menu of products. So that $36 trillion is actually a misstatement of the value of companies in our country, because those companies are invested in through a series of funds, and 80% of the total market value is now in the hands of what we would call institutional investors. That's who owns it. That's who controls it. That's who really does the buying and the selling of stocks. So what we don't have in the small business environment is access. The investor lacks access to the small business, and the small business entrepreneur lacks access to the investor. So this major problem was something that has been researched in the Dream Exchange team. We're going on 14 years from the first research commencing. We've been operational in founding the exchange now for going on 2 years, and we'll probably have another year to go to actually get licensed and to become fully operational. On the other hand, we're already trying to do something about it today. So if you have a chance to become one of those 3,600 companies, or hopefully, if we have anything to say about it, the 20,000 companies that we intend to create out of the environment, because I think there are thousands of eligible companies. Your company would be eligible. We need to go through the webinar process, go through the educational process so that your idea and your company can become one of the companies that's part of the public fabric, that's part of the makeup of our country. And that way your idea can be expanded. Your imagination is valuable, if to no one else, to the Dream Exchange. So what we want to do here is show you that $36 trillion, you can add to that value. That value exists. It's just not known in the public markets. So what we have to do is do something to change that. A genuine solution to modify how this is all done and to create a brand new type of stock exchange that will help the small company. So what we're doing, first of all, we're creating what's called a national exchange. That's not really the subject of this particular webinar. There will be webinars upcoming on what that means. A national exchange is identical to, in all aspects, what you know as the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, the Investors Exchange. There are now 7 really exchanges that exist. So one of those 7, we plan to become an 8th in the coming year. That's really not what we're addressing here. What we're addressing here is a brand new type of stock exchange, and it's contained in a law called the Main Street Growth Act. Now, we're working very carefully with congressional leadership this year because except for COVID and except for political disruptions, this is a law that was unanimously agreed to by the members of Congress in 2018 and has tremendous support throughout the entire Congress. And here's what this law does. It creates a new type of stock exchange called venture stock exchanges. And we're at the forefront of this. We've weighed in very heavily and contributed lots of information to the congressional record and worked with congressional staff and the SEC to provide the information on what a venture stock exchange should look like. It also creates a brand new type of stock called a venture security, a separate and complete share of stock that it looks nothing like the stocks that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange, a brand new way for that small business investor and small business entrepreneur to meet and actually have a separate way to buy and sell stock in a public market to get the entire American investing public. Now, some of this can be done in crowdfunding, but you're limited to $5 million. And crowdfunding platforms are stock brokerages. They're not stock exchanges. And what that means is that the crowdfunding platform you go to will have a stake in the outcome. They actually have a stake in the company. So when the company is going to crowdfund, they have to work with a stock brokerage. They have to make sure that that stock brokerage, in fact, will cooperate with them, and they'll charge fees or commissions to produce the crowdfunded investment. A stock exchange doesn't do that. We will help you to create your company's eligibility to list on a stock exchange, but we're not part owner of your company. In fact, it is a marketplace. It's a marketplace where buyers and sellers meet. That's all a stock exchange is. Buyers and sellers of stock meet under a very customized set of rules. And we're at the forefront of creating what the new rules will look like for venture stock exchanges. We intend to be the first one. And a benefit of this bill is that it creates liquidity in that marketplace I was just discussing with you. The private capital markets will now have a new way to access one another and have liquidity. They can turn one's private investment into cash at any time or decide to hold on to the investment. But it is an individual choice rather than, oh my gosh, it's a fantastic company, but I'd really like to recuperate my investment. And the only way I can do it is when the owners of the company decide to sell the entire thing. Or as an investor, I have to sell the whole company. Well, we're changing that. And that access to liquidity for the investor is equal to the access to emerging businesses to getting the investors on board. Now, this last point, number 5, transparent, safe investing environment. If you get a chance, we've actually published a white paper on this very topic. In fact, the characteristics of a company that will succeed are very well known. The name of the white paper is Low Visibility Markets Acting as Stepping Stones to National Exchanges. So a private market is considered low visibility. There's not access. So that white paper describes in great detail what the characteristics of every company that can make it are. It's published in Oxford University's Handbook on IPOs. It's in Chapter 9. Myself and Professor Floros, who's the Director of Research at the Dream Exchange, are the authors of that white paper, and it describes in great detail how the marketplace is transparent, safe, and what the characteristics of the entrepreneurial company that will succeed in this new marketplace are. I hope you're having a great week and a great day. I hope you're prosperous and healthy. And ours is a very much a message of hope. I think that our world will be a better place tomorrow. I think we're all working on that. I think we cooperate with one another towards at least the vast majority of people really do cooperate with one another in making this world into a better place. So I'm grateful that you gave me your hour today. I really want to encourage you to look at the other webinars. We'll have more webinars coming very soon. And I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. And we'll see you real soon. Thanks, everybody.